John Ruddick, welcome into the weeds, mate. Really appreciate you taking the time to come on the podcast.
I am truly delighted to be here, Jeremy. Thank you for the invitation.
It's a great opportunity for us to talk about liberalism, classical liberals, liberals, neoliberals, liberal Democrats and libertarians, because you've been a bit of all of those things in your time, haven't you?
Well, look, I joined the Liberal... I grew up in Tamworth in the country. My parents were very politically interested, but they never thought about joining a party. So I was growing up in the 1980s, and my parents were cheering on Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher and John Howard, and I was really interested in it. And then, you know, when I left school, I spent 2 years working on a massive cotton farm between Walgett and Moree. You know about that part of the world because you're picking up the rotten fish thing. And when I was out there, I mean, I'm watching the Berlin Wall come down, okay, and I'm seeing all these people so happy to get liberated from socialism. And I thought, gee, Mum and Dad were right about everything. So then I thought, well, I better go to university. I come to Sydney, I ring up the Liberal Party, and they just take ages and ages to get back to me. I finally get involved in the Liberal Party. But the thing that really sort of sent me down the libertarian path from just being as opposed to just a classical liberal was reading Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged when I was about in second year uni. And it's a very long book. It's a novel for those that are not familiar with it. But Ayn Rand she's sort of known as the goddess of capitalism and individualism. And so that's, you know, so got involved in the Liberal Party and was in the right-wing faction of the Liberal Party, which I thought was sort of the John Hewson fight-back style faction. But as time went on, it sort of became, and they were sort of like my social group in Sydney, the right-wing faction of the Liberal Party, and they still are. And they're still some of my best friends, people like David Clark, used to be a colleague of yours. Okay. But as time went on, you know, the right-wing faction of the New South Wales Liberal Party became dominated by social conservatives. Okay. And I'm sympathetic to a lot of that stuff. Okay. And, you know, but yeah, I was really mainly about sort of, you know, economic reform and making the government smaller, letting free enterprise flourish. And I'd never really sort of wanted to get into Parliament. I had been spending my political energy on fighting these massive factional battles in the State Council of the Liberal Party. Some of these battles would go for 6 years about bringing about democratic reform within the Liberal Party. And then...
Well, before we get into your long history in the Liberal Party, tell us a little bit about, it must have been more than just reading Atlas Shrugged. That you studied history at university. What was it in history that you must have read Locke and other philosophers, these types of things. What did you look to in history to guide you going forward in terms of your political philosophy and your, the energy you've clearly put into politics?
You know, when I got to about sort of year 9 in a public high school at Tamworth, my parents bought a World Book Encyclopedia set. And I really neglected school. And I can't ever remember doing homework. And I just wasn't interested. I didn't think I was going to go to university. But I just would read these encyclopedias, and it was always about history. And and biographies of famous people. So I would just sort of go from one subject to another. And I was just like gripped by what the hell happened before us? Because I think if we have an understanding of the trajectory we're on and what's worked in the past and what hasn't worked in the past, I thought, well, that can help us sort of make the future better.
That's so funny you say that, because I had a similar experience. We had the World Book Encyclopedia, and if I was bored, it's a rainy day, there's no internet, there's no Google, I would just open it and flop it open on a page. And just read whatever that thing was, and then just flop another one open and read that. So you would juxtapose all these strange things, a bit of like Neolithic, history, and then, some king or queen had died or done this or the other. For all the kids at home, that was what, that was like analog Google was, just reading this great big manual on life.
Absolutely. No, I'm pleased that we've had a similar experience there. And I used to find that you'd read an article, and at the end of the World Book, at the end of the article, it would say, if you're interested in this subject, you might also be interested in these other things. So one thing would sort of lead to another. And so then I was not expecting to go to university, but then I thought, no, look, I'm really interested in politics, and I should go and study. And all I wanted to do was study history. So I went to this, and I think I must have only just got into Sydney University for a humble little Bachelor of Arts, because I never really, as I said, never did any homework. But I got in 1991, and then you had to do 18 subjects to get your BA, and 16 of my subjects were history, and then there was archaeology, so that's pretty history. And I went really well on it because I was really into it, and that was around the same time I got involved with the good old Liberal Party.
What fascinated you in history? What were you looking at? Were you looking at ancient Egypt, medieval history? Were you looking at, like more modern history? What fascinated you?
Well, look, I suppose, the ancient history, I think you really need to understand the rest of history. You need to know what was going on, particularly with the Greeks and the Romans. I mean, in so many ways, what is happening today in Australia is a continuation of the Roman culture in so many ways. We are Romans, And
so where in the rise and fall of the Roman Empire do you think the United States is at the moment? Are we at the moment where we have our like Caesar, or are we just about to have a Caesar?
Well, look, people say that Rome fell. The city of Rome fell in the 5th century, but they'd already basically moved to Constantinople. Okay, and so that Roman civilization powered on for another 1,000 years, and then Western Europe really took off. So it's the same thing. Now you are right. There are a number of extraordinary parallels between the Roman Republic and the American Republic. I mean, they were both founded by a ragtag little group of people who were sort of running away from a war. Like the Pilgrims in America, and then they got rid of their king, and then they had a republic, and then the republic then they took over the world. Okay, so by about 148 BC, Rome was all supreme in the Mediterranean world. They'd wiped out Carthage, they'd wiped out the Greeks. They were just superheroes, and that was sort of like America in 1991 when the Soviet Union fell over. Now then, after the Romans had taken over the Mediterranean world, the known world, then their warrior spirit then turned inward. So because there was no more enemies to fight over the hill, they thought, okay, well, let's fight each other. So they had all these dreadful internal political wars that turned into bloody wars. I mean, you've listened to Mike Duncan, The History of Rome, haven't you? Yes.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
It is, yes. The thing I like about the Mike Duncan podcast with Rome is everybody who's got a bit of an interest in history knows about Rome, but we know that about Rome, we know that about Rome, we know that about Rome. But the Mike Duncan things does it as a narrative. It's like Rome for dummies. Okay, so even though you might know a lot about one field, Mike Duncan puts it in this big, beautiful narrative which you can follow. So I think it's the best podcast ever.
Oh, it's absolutely incredible. If anyone, wants to spend a couple of months listening, I listened to it through COVID, and so got an education there. What I found really fascinating was just how many Roman emperors were Syrians and Croatians, and they're not all Italians. Most of the really good generals were, from Central Europe or Germans and the rest, and how much of the Roman army was actually just, were basically hired guns. They were, German tribes fighting other German tribes, or Gauls fighting Gauls, or, they would just hire the local people that were already, ascendant to keep them in power. So it was it's a good education in, political dynamics and, power plays and also the Machiavellian intrigues of what turned into just essentially a court, didn't it?
Well, when you read about ancient Greek politics, it feels as though it's somewhat removed from us. I mean, it's all interesting and everything, but it sort of feels like it's a little alien. When you read about the Roman politics, it feels like today. This is why I say that the culture has continued, and it's been a good thing. I mean, those Romans were pretty horrible people to people that they invaded. When Julius Caesar became a great figure, when he wrote back from Gaul and he said, "Oh, look, I've killed 1 million of them, innocent men and women and children," but that made him a hero. Now, the best thing that ever happened to the Roman Empire that civilized them was becoming Christians. Okay, in about the 4th century. Now, look, I'm probably a deist. Okay, where like the American founding fathers, I believe there probably is a God and he probably is good, but he doesn't look like he's interfering in the world. But he's probably watching us from a distance. I could be sort of persuaded to be a Christian deist because I think it's not impossible Jesus he's the biggest human that's ever lived. Like we're in the year 2025. Well, where do we come up with that number from? Oh, well, that was from his birthday. Okay, and the two biggest holidays of the year are Christmas and Easter, all about Jesus. And then, so look,
Were they really about Sol Invictus? So weren't they just stole Roman holidays? And I'm surprised you're not a pagan. You're not because liberalism comes, I think it's from liberalis. It's like a Roman cult, just free will. So I'm surprised you're not like a pagan.
Well, libertarians
you're not sacrificing an ox every now and then. And
well, I'm glad you raised it, Jeremy. I would like to clear up something. Libertarians certainly believe in rules. I'm sitting here in your office now, and you can set rules now, and I have to abide by the rules. And if I don't, then you can ask me to leave. Okay, so we believe in lots of rules. Rules are good, but what we don't believe in is having a heavily armed, centralised state dictating what the rules will be. And if you don't obey them, then they will use coercion against you. So the thing about where libertarians differ from classical liberals is...
Well, let's walk us through it. Like, what's a classical liberal?
Okay.
Locke.
Yeah, Locke. And in the political world, it would be Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher. Okay, they cut taxes, they were cut regulations, they were pro-business. Okay, they wanted to get out of the way. Okay, and things went really well for 3 decades in the wake of the Reagan and Thatcher reforms. You know, Thatcher really started in 79. Okay, now we had not had in the English-speaking world a really hardcore pro-free market leader since Calvin Coolidge in the 1920s. And then Thatcher comes along and says all these good things, and then Reagan comes in 18 months later. And both of them, we remember them now as popular and successful political leaders. But both Reagan and Thatcher, they brought in these tough economic reforms. They had to kill the inflation at the time. They cut back spending and stuff. And both economies went into quite a sharp recession for about 18 months.
Well, I remember Thatcher and coal miner strikes and austerity measures, and it was quite a dark time.
Well, England was going down the drain, and then Thatcher comes along and had to give this sick patient some tough medicine, and she was deeply unpopular about 18 months in. But then her magnificent economic reforms bore fruit, and boom. And then England boomed, America boomed, and we had Labor government in this country in the 1980s, and they just copied Margaret Thatcher. That's why Bob Hawke and Paul Keating are successful, because Hawke came in 4 years after Thatcher. And Hawke never campaigned on privatisations and floating the currency and deregulating stuff and cutting taxes. But Hawke had
privatisations.
Privatisations, exactly. Hawke had the magnificent benefit. I mean, he was the luckiest political leader there ever was. This Bob Hawke, in so many ways. He had 4 years of seeing the Reagan, the Thatcher success, and he says, "Oh, okay, we'll just do all that, but we'll be a little bit more humane about it. The rhetoric will be a little bit more humane." But
they did a lot of removing tariffs, which is interesting.
Oh, well, they were right, and Trump's wrong on tariffs. Yes.
Oh, really? Well, we'll get to that. Because I thought that would be an interesting one for you. So essentially, the classical liberal, it was the modern neoliberal. That's sometimes on the left, that's the pejorative term that's used for those people that come in and there's austerity, privatisations, the cut government spending, loosen up regulations, those sorts of things. That all floated your boat. You're all pretty happy with that. Joined the Liberal Party.
Yeah, well, Jeremy,
but not good enough. Why?
No. Well, Jeremy, you would remember in the 1980s, when you and I would have been teenagers, these absolutely heartbreaking, harrowing scenes on TV of Ethiopia, and as far as the eye can see, human beings like 2 days away from starving to death. Remember that? Triggered the whole Live 18. I was brokenhearted when I saw that. And we used to have famines in Africa quite a lot. Why was that? Well, after they got independence from the Europeans in the 1950s and 60s, they all thought, socialism is a good idea. And, surprise, surprise, there's famines, frequent famines in Africa and in India in the 1970s as well. Now, then what happened after the Thatcher and Reagan successes? It was very clear by the mid-80s, wow, this is working. Free market economics is working. It's making people happy and prosperous. And then the third world, Africa, India, Latin America, China, the little place called China, they all said, we're gonna follow the Thatcherite reforms to some extent. And guess what happened? No, you haven't seen a famine in Africa for 30 years, have you? There was one in Darfur about 18 years ago that was caused by a war. Okay, but in terms of just running out of food. So thank you, Margaret Thatcher, for what you did there.
I did watch a doco recently on Mao and how many people he starved to death with his economic reforms. I mean, pretty deadly communism. And I think it was like 65 million people. It's more people than died in World War II, or just unfathomable numbers of people died because they just took all the grain, propped up their economy and their currency by exporting, while literally millions, actually young, the people that died most were young women because they were sort of most disposable. It sounds totally gross, but that's what happened in the 1960s. The Chinese starved tens of millions of their own people to death, which is pretty rugged.
And you're entirely correct. And the sad thing is that very few people, we're just around the corner from Martin Place. If we went and asked 100 people randomly, have you heard about the Chinese famine? As you say, bigger than World War II in terms of the deaths, barely any of them would know about it. And that's because there was no sort of TV cameras. Okay, now in Germany in the 1930s and 40s, TV cameras were everywhere. So there's quite a bit of footage so we can see the horrors about what went on when they opened up the concentration camps. It's on TV, live forever. Okay, but we don't know about the Soviet horrors. Well, the academics do, but we don't. It doesn't sort of resonate with the public. Well, another reason it doesn't resonate is because the left-wingers sort of run our popular culture, and they don't want to talk about the crimes of the left.
Well, they don't talk, and the starvation by the Russians of the Ukrainians, like what's it called? I forget the name. The Holodomor, yeah, and that was again tens of millions of Ukrainians starved to death, eating bark off trees, and absolutely abysmal. So you thought that the capitalism was the go. You've joined the Liberal Party in the early 90s as a young man, but you set about wanting to democratise it.
Okay, well, what happened was I was going to the Mossman Young Liberals, and there was about 7 people turning up.
That would have been a party. That would have been a real... The Mossman Young Liberals.
There was about 7 people would turn up at an RSL about once every 4 months. And I said, look, is there anything else that goes on in the Liberal Party? They said, there's this thing called Young Liberal State Council. I said, when's that on? And they told me. So I turned up. It was just down here in Barrack Street on a Tuesday night or something. I turned up there. There's 100 people in the room, and they're all the activists of the Young Liberal across New South Wales. I don't know anybody. I walk in there, and they're having this unbelievable argument about whether gay couples should be able to adopt kids. And I'm just sitting there watching. And it got really, really heated. And the right-wingers were opposed to it, and there was 3 of them which were drunk and disorderly. And then the president asked them to leave. And then they were abusive on the way out, and one of them kicked over a chair. And I'm just sitting there, what the hell's all this? And then one of these right-wing guys, while he's standing at the door just about to leave, he said to this guy sitting right over my shoulder, who had been one of his opponents during this debate, this heated debate, this right-winger over here, big guy's at the door, and he says, I like your puffy skivvy, right? Now, just as a smart-ass comment, right? And then this guy, that just set him off. And he just leaps up out of his chair, and he dislocated the shoulder of the girl I was sitting next to. And there was this, fight for 20 seconds. And it was remember the old Batman and Robin TV show, the half-hour show?
Yeah.
Kapow, kapow. It was like that for 20 seconds right in front of me. Right?
That's terrible.
And I got the paper for a few days. And anyway, I rang up Talkback Radio the next day because the media was talking about it. I said, look, this was caused by the right-wingers. I said, this guy did start the violence, but, he was provoked. They'd been really mean to him and everything. And then at the next Young Liberal Council meeting...
But that didn't put you off.
No.
You went back for more.
Oh, well, this is what happened then, Jeremy. This is what happened then. So then the next month, they have the same Young Liberal Council and had all this negative media, and the place is packed. There's 300 people there. And Barry O'Farrell was the state director, and he's chairing the meeting. They're going to expel these 3 right-wingers from the party. And the guy that started the violence got up there and started crying. He said, they attacked me. And I'm thinking, what? You started the violence. I went to him afterwards. I said, mate, you shouldn't feel bad about what you did because these guys were assholes to you. But then he gets up there and starts crying. He said, these right-wingers, they attacked me. I was sitting there doing nothing. They started punching me. I got up there and I said, what planet am I living on? I said, not many people in this room were at that meeting. I was there. I was right there. I said, I was sympathetic to you, but you just got up and told a bald-faced lie. And then after that, I basically became the leader of the opposition, the leader of the right-wing faction, just because I got up and really took them on. So then someone rang me up the next day and said, hey, John, why don't you run for Young Liberal President for New South Wales? I said, what, didn't I just embarrass myself last night? Because these guys got kicked out. It was about an 80% vote to kick them out. And they said, no, John, look, you're a fresh face. No one really knows you, so you're a clean slate. He said, just run. You won't win, but we'll know where our numbers are. I said, okay, so I'll run. So I got really, look, I then sort of off and on over the next 20 years, I'd have these bursts of activity in the Liberal Party. But then I had this reputation for being erratic because I had this burst of activity and then I say, give up on the Liberal Party. It's hopeless. It's not going anywhere. Then something would happen and I'd get back in. But sometimes I wouldn't go to branch meetings for like 6 years or so. But then,
look, there seems to be a contradiction there, which is you're a liberal, but you're in the right faction, which is socially conservative. So that must have grated with you.
Yeah, well, that was the reason why I sort of had this sort of inconsistent level of motivation. Now, I didn't like the left because the liberal left were basically teals. Okay, they were basically left-wingers who didn't believe in trade unions. That they were North Shore left-wingers, okay? So I didn't like them one bit, okay? And look, I was just sort of, I'm from the country, which I suppose is a fairly socially conservative area. And I was just, I was good mates with them all. But yeah, as time went on, I thought, look, I believe in Ayn Randism and Thatcherism, and these guys sort of just want to talk about other issues which aren't front and centre for me. But I thought that...
So economic issues, the actual, like how you design your society, how you design a government, if you actually have one. Because what's the new term that Javier Millei's into?
Anarcho-capitalism.
Yeah, anarcho-capitalism, but what's it? Minimalist? Minarchist. So a minimal capitalist, isn't it? Minimal government capitalist. Is that the new word?
Libertarians fit into two categories broadly. There's minarchists, which would probably be most libertarians, and there's anarcho-capitalists. So the difference is the minarchist believes that the government should take a tax revenue off the people every year of about 5 to 10%. At the moment in Australia, if you add up the federal taxes, the state taxes, the local taxes, excise duties, everything else, it's about 56% is what the government is taking off the people. Now, that once you get over 50%, well, welcome to democratic socialism. So everyone agrees, except for the Greens, that it should be not as high as 56% because it's smothering the people. Okay, now the Labor Party, I think, the traditional Labor Party would probably like to get it down to, they think 30% is fair enough. People should hand over 30% of their wealth every year. The average Liberal Party person in history would probably believe at 20%. When Robert Menzies stopped being the Prime Minister, it was 18%, and that's why we boomed. Okay, but then so someone like John Howard would probably sort of, probably be around 20, 25%. Now, the minarchist believes we can get the government spending down to 5 to 10%. Okay, so that would include Ayn Rand. That would include Milton Friedman, David Leyonhjelm, who used to be a senator from our party.
Hayek, all these guys.
Hayek. They still believe the government's a good thing. Okay. Now, what the purist libertarians, which I will admit I didn't even know existed before I joined the party 3 or 4 years ago, there's these anarcho-capitalists, which is what Javier Milei in Argentina, who's doing a magnificent job. He basically is open a bit saying, look, I believe in anarcho-capitalism. Now, he says we're going to phase it in over 50 years, which is basically eliminating the state entirely. And it seems
even your defence force or your judiciary, or your police.
Okay, well, the judiciary is an easy one. But yes, the answer to that question is yes. Okay, so what we would now the hardest one is defence. So what we would need to do is probably maintain the defence till the very end. Once the rest of the world sees the greatness of anarcho-capitalism in action and the rest of the world starts to move in that direction so the states become a lot less powerful, then we won't have to worry about invasion. We won't have to worry about going to war all the time. Look, a lot of people who are watching the show probably don't know that much about libertarianism. If I can sum it up really quickly, I would say this. The Libertarian Party is basically the Liberal Party, but we, in an economic sense, but we really mean it, okay? We're a purist version of what the Liberal Party. We believe the government should be a lot smaller, taxes should be a lot smaller, regulations should be a lot smaller. But the big difference that we have with the Liberal Party is war. The Liberal Party and its forebears, from before we federated, since the Boer War, the right wingers in this country, if England goes off to war or America goes off to war, the right wingers in this country say, yes, sir, how can we follow you off,
Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan.
The Boer War.
The Boer War, Sudan.
The stupidest war of all time, World War I, okay, which was over nothing. Oh, we just killed 20 million fine young men, though. Okay, so the Liberal Party, and you said with Peter Dutton today, you know,
Well, the Boer War, like there's an argument the Boer War was actually World War One. It was just the warm up between the Germans and the British, because the Germans didn't have any colonies. They were saying, oh well, look, let's see if we can muscle the British out of South Africa, with the Boers, and then didn't work so well. Have another crack in World War One/2. Didn't work, and then have another go, World War II/3.
That's an interesting angle about the World War, yes. But so libertarians, so Trump last Friday said that he wants to have a meeting with Putin and Xi from China, and he wants to have this summit, just the three of them, and talk about that they all agree to cut their military spending by 50%. Thank God for Donald Trump. Now,
it's a remarkable thing, and the left really is blindsided. I think blindsided by this because it's one of the things that I looked at with Trump back in 2016. Went, this guy's not a warmonger. Yeah. I'd be surprised if someone doesn't knock him off. And if people are looking for who might be assassinating Donald Trump, it's probably someone who's got shares in McDonnell Douglas or builds aircraft carriers for a living, because he's a real peacenik. He's saying, let's get out of wars, let's defund the military, and straight away we've, one way or the other, we've seen Gaza just stop, like essentially peace in Gaza, and straight away we've seen a de-escalation and a dialogue in Ukraine. When 3 months ago we saw the Democrats approving long range missile strikes into Russia, which was a provocation, and the Russians talking about nuclear war, and that's just gone. Like nuclear holocaust is off the agenda, possibly a good thing.
Look, I am really optimistic about mankind. You think about what we've achieved since the Neolithic Revolution, when we started having agriculture. We used to be hunter-gatherers. That would have been a brutal life. And that was only 12,000 years ago. And look what we've achieved. We've put man on the moon. We've built the internet. Okay, and things are going good. But the whole thing can be destroyed with a nuclear goddamn war. Okay, and this is, the nukes that they've got today, I've heard reports that you can basically wipe France out with one Russian bomb, turn it into glass. Now, maybe that's exaggerated. I'm sure you can wipe out Paris. Okay. Now, this is a major issue. Now,
the nuclear weapons we've got today are tens of thousands of times bigger, more powerful than the bomb that wiped out Hiroshima. And the strategy from the US and the Russians is, we're going to fire all of them at once. If there is a nuclear war, it's not like we're just going to fire one or two and see how that goes. I think the US, their plan for a nuclear exchange with Russia is to drop 140 or more just on Moscow, when one would do. So that to make sure of it, they just are going to send us all into a nuclear Armageddon or a nuclear winter, and that's not impossible, is it?
Jeremy, you've listened to Mike Duncan's other podcast on the Russian Revolution, haven't you?
Yeah, I sure have.
And that's 103 episodes. And those episodes go for a much longer. Okay. Now, I was gripped by that podcast. Now, no country on earth has more dramatic history than Russia. It's just like whatever happens in Russia is big. Okay, like the upheavals. Okay. Now, poor old Russians have suffered for 1,000 years. Those Tsars were bastards. Okay, there's one or two good ones that were a little bit liberal, but they were mongrels. They weren't like the Western European monarchs that sort of said, let's have a parliament and we'll start to hand over power, like the good old English monarchs. But no, they stayed up there. And then they have the Soviet Union, okay? And then they have World War II and World War I and all this, okay? And the poor old Russian people have suffered so much. And then Boris Yeltsin comes along, stands on the tank, overthrows the Soviet Union, and that was, 35 years ago. And I look at Russia today and I think, okay, look, they've got McDonald's. Well, before the stupid war that we've having with Ukraine, they've got McDonald's, they've got Coca-Cola, they've got cars, they've got no famines, okay? And they do have elections, and you don't have to be one political party. Now, I know it's still a bit repressive, but the fact is, this poor country, very important country, all its weaponry, and it's a big country, obviously, It's never been more liberal than it is today. Now it's not
Well,
Switzerland.
remember they had the Olympics and everyone was
Yes.
shaking hands with Putin, and they had the Winter Olympics, and they were all, they were the flavour of the month just 15 years ago.
If you watch Hollywood movies from that period 15 years ago and the Russians are in it, they're usually collaborating with the Americans.
They're the goodies.
We sort of get along with them. Now, what happened was...
And all the oligarchs were, buying football teams, and they're our oligarchs.
Yeah.
I think that's hilarious when people say, oh, my God, America's going to be run by oligarchs. And I'm going, when wasn't it? When weren't rail barons or oil barons running, the gigantic capitalists? And now it's just Musk and Bezos and whoever. It's just, you just swap out your billionaires, really.
Yeah, well, and the libertarian view is most of these billionaires became billionaires because they came up with a magnificent product that lots of consumers decided to voluntarily part money with so they could become... But back to Russia, what happened was we should be saying to Russia, let's be friends. Let's have free trade agreements. Let's invest in each other's countries. Let's have people movements around the place. Let's be friends with Russia. Who doesn't want to be friends with Russia? The military-industrial complex. Okay, so when Soviet Union, the Berlin Wall comes down in 89, the Soviet Union falls over in 91, 2 years later. But what happened in the middle was the reunification of Germany, which was very controversial at the time. And Thatcher was still in power, and Helmut Kohl was there, and Gorbachev was there, and George Bush Sr. And they came to this agreement. They had about 200 meetings about it. They said, okay, well, the Germans want to be reunited, and the Soviet Union said, okay, well, we'll agree to that. But look, on the very strict proviso that NATO never, this is the exact words they use, NATO will never move 1 inch east, because they were going to let East Germany become part of NATO. Okay. And so that was the deal. Everyone shook on it. Yep, deal, yep. And why would we? And then the Soviet Union falls over the next year. There's no need for frigate NATO after the Soviet Union fell over. It should have been disbanded, okay? Now, then what happened was in 1997, several years later, Bill Clinton just announces overnight, we've let Hungary, the Czech Republic, and
the Baltic states, maybe.
I think they were a bit later, but another big one. They let 3 countries into NATO. And Yeltsin says, what the hell's going on here? Firstly, you weren't going to expand these, and secondly, why do you want to sort of, upset good relations? And Clinton, it's all come out now. Clinton was tricked into it by the lobbyists of the military-industrial complex, Lockheed Martin and all these boys, because if a country joins NATO, their air force, their navy, their military is all got to be integrated into it. Money.
Cruise missiles.
Yes. They can't just use their old Czech tanks. They got to get the NATO ones. And that was 3. The Russians were very unhappy. Then in about sort of 2004, they let in about 12 countries, which I think included the Baltic states. And Putin's there. He says, what the hell's going on here?
Turkey's part of NATO, isn't it?
It is. Yes. And
I don't even think it's part of Europe.
Yeah, it's not part of the EU, but it's part of NATO.
Yeah.
And then in 2008, under George W. Bush and Dick Cheney, the two great the guys that have got the blood of millions on their hands, along with John Howard. They go and expand it now, so the whole of Russia is surrounded by NATO. When we should be having good relations. Now we know it's still going to be a bit of a brutal state. Bad things are still going to happen in Russia, but the trend line's good. And the libertarians say that the neocons are motivated by glory and money. Bad qualities that we want. Now then, Trump comes along.
Well, how can you be like you're maybe you're not a narco-capitalist, but you're a libertarian. You want free money. So what's wrong with being motivated by money? Why isn't that just capitalism writ large? Just in the form of we're selling nuclear weapons and aircraft carriers, and
when the customer is the government, it means so it's not the free market. People aren't voluntarily coughing up their own money. What's happening is the government is stealing money off the people. And then the government is getting manipulated by the defence contractors, and then they're giving it to the defence contractors. So, we are pro-business, pro-capitalism, but we are violently opposed to crony capitalism, whether that's the defence industry, big pharma, or those crooks, and lots of other industries. They probably knock on your door every week and say, we want money for this reason. They've always got a good answer, don't they? They've always it's critical. It's critical that you give us money. So, no, there's a distinction between capitalism and crony capitalism.
There's an interesting thing, an element to the libertarians is your, I think it's surprising, but refreshing that you're against military, the military and war, because the legalized cannabis party, it's part of our ethos is peace. Just relax, man. You know, don't kill each other.
Yes.
Let's start with that principle of because you know there's nothing that impinges on your liberty more than having someone kill you. You can have a disagreement, but when you resort to violence, it's it's the end. But what about the right to bear arms, because that is the manifestation of personal liberty for a lot of people in the United States. So there seems to be a contradiction there. You don't want violence and war between states, but what about between individuals? How do you manage that?
There's a lot of diversity on the libertarian spectrum, but the one thing that we are all in agreement on is the right to bear arms. Now, why would that be? I've never fired a gun in my life. Okay, so
Are you carrying a gun?
No, well, I don't know how to fire one. Okay, so that's how it is today. But I do strongly believe in the right to bear arms. I believe John Howe did a massive disservice to this country. Now, the first reason is that there's always going to be a ton of guns in society, and who has the guns in Australia at the moment is the government, the police, the intelligence agencies, the military. So the government has got a ton of power. And Australia, the people, unless you're a criminal, of course, they've got a ton of guns. The people are now farm animals, and we're subject to the whim of the state. Now, during the silly COVID...
But why can't you just why can't you get a gun license and buy a gun?
Well, we want people to be able to go and do that, yes.
But you can.
Well, in Australia...
Yeah.
Well, it's extremely regulated. A lot of people, you've got to pass a ton of tests, and then you've got to be a member of a gun club or a farmer or something. But
no, I don't think you have to be. I don't think you have to be a farmer to own a gun.
No, you can also. Most farmers have got guns because they've got feral pigs and foxes and everything. But I mean, people can go through a million hoops and pay money to be able to have a pistol at a gun range.
But you think like the situation in the United States where you can turn up, no background check, get a gun within hours, and like a serious gun, like an assault rifle or an automatic pistol or something like that. That's the situation we should have in Australia.
Well, everyone wants to bring up the US when they talk about this issue, but we prefer to talk about Switzerland, which has the second highest gun ownership in the world and the lowest homicide rate in the world. So most households in Switzerland have got a gun. It's the most libertarian country on earth. Now, in America, there are several states where the the homicide rate from guns is on par with Australia. Now, but there are a lot of homicides in America from guns, and this is a inner city gang problem. Where there are inner city gangs in Paris or Berlin, then it's a similar amount of the gangs are just killing themselves.
With guns?
Yes, with guns. Now, if you go to Vermont or Wyoming, okay, they're homicide, and everyone's got a gun at the homicide.
I've been to Wyoming and I've seen them. Like, you've got open carry. People carry guns. When you go to the bar, you've got to leave your gun.
Okay.
You can't go and drink. They serve whiskey, a quart of whiskey. So there, they don't have responsible service of alcohol. You ask for one whiskey and you're written off. And luckily enough, they make everyone check their guns. But everyone drives around with their rifles in the window of their car. So you've got to have open carry. So if you're carrying a rifle in your car, like an assault rifle, I'm talking about like something that will, stop a tank, you've just got to have it in the window. So everyone's just driving around. And some people have like a gun rack. They have a shotgun, they have a scoped rifle, and they have like an M16 or something like that, or something vintage, just, in their F-150 cruising around in Wyoming. You'd like to see that in Tamworth?
Well, I bet that the homicide rate from guns in Wyoming is on par with New South Wales because they don't have inner city gang problems. So it would be.
I don't think they have inner cities.
Well, that's a factor. Yes. Now the biggest reason why libertarians believe in the right to bear arms is this: if the government becomes a tyranny, and we believe that all governments evolve in that direction, a crisis comes along and they want to get themselves bigger and bigger and bigger. And when they become a tyranny, what will keep them in check so they don't evolve into an East German-style government is if the people have got the right to bear arms. Why is that? Because the government knows that if the people get upset, they can overthrow the government. Now, we won't have to go to that bother of overthrowing the government if the government remains in check. Now, during the stupid COVID hysteria in this country, which Australia
But
lost...
don't we do that through the ballot box rather than, form an angry mob and grab your pitchforks and your blunderbuss and turn up at Macquarie Street because of the laws? Don't you vote them out? Because otherwise, isn't it a dictatorship?
Well, we would. Well, I think the best example is COVID. Okay, so these warp speed vaccines, I think, at best did no good. They may have done some harm, but in Australia, 98% of people took at least two of these warp speed vaccines, and in America, it's about 70%. Now, in America, just like Australia, the president was saying take all your jabs, the media was saying take all your jabs, there was social pressure, the academics were saying, the courts were saying it, the whole system was saying it. But in Australia, it's 98%. In America, it's 70%. Now, what's the difference? When it was the same, very similar culture to Australia and America, and the same sort of psyop was going on. And I believe the big difference is the American government knows it cannot push the American people around too much because they can arc up.
Texas.
In Australia, we are farm animals. Okay, and if the two major parties collude to take away our rights, like they did during COVID, there's nothing we can do about it. Okay. Now, the second biggest reason we believe in the right to bear arms.
I mean, it's a good point. Like whenever we've had a crisis, like a terrorism crisis, all the thing the governments do is just they get together and they take away your rights. So, people can be taken off the street, arrested, questioned for like days on end, held, and they're not allowed to tell people that they've even been questioned. We've got some pretty powerful and frightening laws when it comes to anti-terrorism, and the major parties really got together on that, didn't they?
When we first federated in 1901, the federal government was very powerless. Only took about 1 or 2% of the GDP off the people. World War I comes along and they say, it's a crisis, so they took income taxation powers off the states. World War II comes along, they took company taxation powers off the states. And they both said it's a temporary measure. And it's never a temporary measure. The government just wants to grow and grow and grow.
Interesting. I saw a graph of global military spending, and from the period like around World War I, Australia was like number 3 in the world.
Sure.
Yeah, so it was like the UK, Germany, I think the US, and then Australia.
Oh, that's interesting.
In total amount of money spent on, like, we're one of the biggest spenders on military in the world, and we've been in the top 20 for our entire existence. So we do spend a lot of money, and here we go with AUKUS. We're about to spend $350 billion on some second-hand subs.
Oh, well, I think the whole AUKUS thing is going to blow up. Trump's announced he wants to cut the budget of the Pentagon in half. What's going to be first on the chopping block? This stupid AUKUS thing. Well, that was a joint venture of ScoMo and Albo. $400 billion off the Australian people. Now, what are these submarines for? To stop Australia being invaded? No. It's to encircle China. Okay, and like with Russia, I say we should be trying to find ways to have good relations with China. We don't want to be best friends, but we say let China be China, Australia can be Australia, and we'll trade and we'll have goodwill, but we don't have to be best friends, but we don't want to be enemies because we are permanently in this neighbourhood. Now, about 4 days ago, I'm sitting there watching the Channel 9 news at home at night, and they say, emergency breaking news. There's been a very close on-air collision between a Chinese aircraft jet and an Australian aircraft jet. Did you hear about that?
Yeah. But where was it?
That's right, exactly. I'm watching
this. It wasn't off the Gold Coast.
I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, then they bring up the map and I'm thinking, geez, this is the Timor Sea, is it off the Great Barrier Reef? I'm thinking, where's these terrible Chinese communists? Oh, no, they say, and the media report...
It's 100 nautical miles off the coast of China.
Yeah, I'm thinking...
What are we doing patrolling up there?
That's right, okay. And that's what AUKUS is about. If someone's going to invade Australia, subs might be a little bit of help, not a ton of help. The subs are about encircling China. And I'm thinking, at some point, America's going to have a president who's going to say, look, let's have a détente with China. And at the moment, we're the Americans' deputy sheriff in this part of the world, and we irritate China. Okay. Now, what if?
Did you know that it's not well known that the US invaded China? invaded mainland China.
Is this the Boxer Rebellion?
No. In 19, I
the
think
40s.
it's not in the 40s. They landed 50,000 Marines on mainland China. Yeah, and Truman was like working out whether or not to. This is just before Korea, but they actually landed troops in China. I might be incorrect, but I'm pretty sure. And like the Chinese remember that.
Yeah, right.
They remember the British and the French sacking Beijing, the Forbidden Palace. They remember what's going on, and then they're looking at Taiwan and going, well, hold on, this has been China for 7,000 years. As long as China's existed, Taiwan's really been part of China, and we're out there sort of saying we're going to defend Taiwan, even though it's been China for that amount of time.
Well, I'm very sympathetic to the good old Taiwanese. I mean, they're democratic, they're capitalist, they're peaceful, they're good people. They've got a very successful country. I very much hope China can just leave it alone. We don't believe in expanding things. But when I look at China and American relations, America is very much is a Christian country in that, like, it's the biggest religion there, right? And Christianity on balance, it may not be true, might be, but even if it's not true, it does make people behave in a more friendly way. Now, the Chinese are very, very, very Confucian. The communists tried to sort of get it out of them, but they are really... And in fact, Confucius says, he had about 15 kids himself, and one of his messages was, have as many kids as you can. This is why there's all these Han Chinese. There's about a billion of them. And
there's 1 point... Well, I think they're not Han, but there's a billion. But they're disappearing pretty quick. But we'll get onto that later.
I think if Jesus and Confucius had met in real life, they'd be mates. And I'm thinking China and America should try to have at least détente. And this is why Trump, all of his critics, which is, I believe it's truly driven by the military-industrial complex, they've always said he'd be the warmonger. No, he's going to bring peace because Trump is someone who builds things. He builds these beautiful buildings. I don't know if you've ever seen a Trump Tower, but these are works of art. These beautiful golf course. He's got this big, beautiful family. He doesn't want to blow things up. Now, and what I think made him skyrocket...
It's bad for business. Nuclear Armageddon.
Right.
It's pretty bad for business.
Right.
And Nixon, he was. Did he meet Mao? Or was
Mao.
He went and met Mao. Only they say only a conservative can get this done. Well, hopefully they can. And so you think AUKUS, it's just a massive waste of money. We've just been conned. The state is just making itself stronger, more powerful, and we should resist and be sceptical.
Absolutely. Now, I believe that Australia should assume that in the next 200 years we will get invaded from Asia. Now, hopefully we're wrong, but we should absolutely assume that's going to happen now. Because, we're a rich country, we're a whole continent, and, look at history, Napoleonic type figures pop up, okay? And so...
Who's going to do that? Like the Indonesians aren't going to do that.
I don't know.
It's a long way to come.
Yeah, well, we've got to assume it. It's safe to assume. We wouldn't want to see our beloved Australia fall, right? So now, how do we defend ourselves? Well, I say, firstly, we give people the right to bear arms, okay? Because if a foreign invading force comes in here and they knock over our military through their missiles or whatever, but they think that every house between here and Darwin's got a rifle, they'll think, okay, well, it's like, even if America had like a 50-year Great Depression and it was like a really weak country, no one would ever invade it because every house is an arms depot, okay? So that's the best thing that we can do to prevent now, in terms of the government, while we've still got a government, while we're not at the anarcho-capitalist utopia, we need to have a defence policy which is designed to prevent an invasion for Australia. Now, we've got to get out of all these entangling alliances, which look, libertarians love Switzerland, and we believe in the Swiss foreign policy.
They've got a pretty big military, though, Switzerland.
Yeah, and no one's messed with them for 500 years because they don't get involved in foreign conflicts. They had World War I swirling around them. They had World War II swirling around them. They had the Cold War swirling around them. Everyone just leaves Switzerland alone.
They just said, just give us your gold. We'll hide it away for you.
Yes. Well, but look, it's better than having, half of your young men wiped out on the battlefield over nothing. So the whole world should be like Switzerland. And I believe Australia should be the Switzerland of the South Pacific. We should just declare to the world, just like Switzerland has, we want free trade with everybody. We want goodwill. If there's a humanitarian problem, like the Red Cross, we'll go over and do our bit. Okay, but we are not gonna get involved in all these alliances. And if you read George Washington's farewell address in the 1790s, it is a magnificent speech. About a third of it's about foreign policy, and he's begging the American Republic, the very young American Republic, he's saying, look, stay out of military alliances. Let's just show the world how great freedom can be here. Then we can help them that way. And
well, we learnt from World War One how terrible that can be. Just these alliances. Well, it wasn't just World War One. There was hundreds of years of, the Austrians, the Habsburgs have shacked up with the Russians against the French, and then the French have shacked up with the British against the Russians, and then they all swap. What was it, the quadrille? The four great powers just had alliances and just sucked each other into abysmal wars for hundreds of years, and that played out in World War One. It was really a legacy of those alliances. That oh my God, someone's shot some minor European monarch, and all of a sudden there's 300,000 Australians fighting in Fromelles and.
So Australians pause to remember Anzac Day, but we do it for Libertarians pause to remember Anzac Day, but we do it for very different reasons to most people. Most people go out there, wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and think, "Oh, those young Anzacs, they died for our freedom." No, that's crap. You've been fed the myth, okay? Because they're trying to get young men to enlist for the next war. I
always think it's a really important point. It's lest we forget, and what do we forget? Like how terrible it was. Like how pointless, how useless. What did it solve? Absolutely nothing. And if you listen to that podcast by Dan Carlin, Hardcore History, about the madness of like Verdun and the Somme and Fromelles and these places where Australians just went, oh my God. We really have, society's only just sort of recovering from it. The legacy, the financial legacy, and the psychological scar for little countries, we're only just recovering from it now. And so, lest we forget,
what the libertarians say is, lest we forget who caused World War One, and who caused World War One were the political class in all these countries. There's been academics debating the causes of World War One for 100 years. They say, someone will write, a 10-volume history on why it's Germany's fault or Britain's fault or Russia's fault or France's fault, okay? And the libertarians look at, no. It was the political class in all these countries that sort of gets sucked in by this love of glory, the glory of winning a big war. And then, of course, what does World War One give us? Gives us the Soviet Union, gives rise to the Nazis, the Cold War, and World War Two. So, but in the 19th century in Europe, they actually had a century of peace largely. Now, you're right, there was a ton of wars in the medieval period and blah, blah, going back to the Romans. But after the Napoleonic Wars, Europe was largely peaceful. And what happened in that century of peace before? Well, the Industrial Revolution, the rise of democracy, civil liberties, constitutions.
Overthrowing the monarchies.
Yes, overthrowing the bad monarchies, and the good monarchies stayed on as constitutional monarchies. But this is what happens when you give people, when there's no wars and small government, the people boomed. Australia was built in the 19th century. But then what happened was, because we'd become so advanced and science had gone so far, we didn't realise that the science had got involved in the munitions industry, and we just didn't realise how powerful things were in World War One, and there was just this, this bloodbath.
It's funny that the Nobel Peace Prize is named after a guy who invented TNT.
Oh, right. Yeah, Alfred Nobel. That's what he's famous for.
Yeah, that's right. I'm pretty sure he's like the industrial chemist that put it together and, blew up half the world. So you're skeptical of big governments. What does, in New South Wales, where we're MPs, what would you see? What would you slash and burn first? Who would be first against the wall? Which departments? Where's the greatest waste? Where's the greatest problem?
Look, it's been a joint venture between Liberal, National, Labor. They all go along with it. There are just endless grants. Okay, we're about to hand over about $500,000 to the Mardi Gras. Okay, now that's just a drop in the ocean, but we've got to get rid of all the drops in the ocean. Now, what I would say with the Mardi Gras is, gee, I wonder whether it could be privately funded. I think it could be, all the banks go and advertise, it's Mardi Gras week, Mardi Gras week. Okay, well, what does the taxpayer have to fund it. And there's a million things like. Now, the Libertarian Party did a budget last year where we listed all the agencies we'd abolish. We'd abolish Tourism New South Wales, pretty much all of these little agencies. We'd get rid of them. And then I'd like to give all public servants a 5% pay cut. Okay, now and this is what Trump should do in America. Okay, just say, look, we'd have to sack a ton of public servants. But the truth is, we don't live in a federation ananymore. Daniel Mookie
Hold on. Sack a ton of public servants. So teachers, nurses, people firefighters, police.
What we would absolutely basically shut down the Department of Education, and how we would do it would be a much better system. What we would do is, in January every year, for every parent that've got like a child under the age of 18, we'd send them a voucher. It'd be worth, say, $10,000. And they can only cash that voucher in at a school that the parent decides that their children should go to. Now, it might be just a normal high school like we've got today, but there'll be competition. One school will say, well, look, spend your $10,000, because the schools will become little businesses. They'll say, spend your voucher with our school, and we'll teach the kids A, B, and C. Another school will say, no, send your kid to this school, and we'll teach them X, Y, and Z. Now,
what if they're teaching them, to be Nazis?
Well, okay.
How do you have oversight of that?
Well,
what if they're teaching hate?
That would probably happen in about sort of 10 or 12 households in the whole of New South Wales, but it's happening already. Okay, so not like that. If the parents are Nazis, they're probably going to teach their kids to be Nazis. We can't have the government.
Yeah, but you don't have a school set up that says, okay, we're only having white people, or we're only having black people, or we're only having we're discriminating.
Well, look, the example I like to use is if we have this school voucher system, and there might be some homeschoolers, there might be religious schools, sports schools, business schools, focus, but they'll be competing for excellence. What's happening at the moment is the Department of Education gives everyone one curriculum, okay, and they have to teach it, whether they're a private school or whatever, Islamic school, public school. Now, the example I like to use is this. At the moment, all this rainbow stuff is being shoved down kids' throats, and global warming. This is all misinformation, at least the global warming, okay. Now, I believe that probably 1 to 2% of kids, parents in New South Wales, will want to send their kids, like around Newtown, right now where you live, where there's more of a bohemian culture, they will want their kids to go to a school where they'll be celebrating rainbow culture. And that's completely fine. But I reckon 98% of parents don't want that shoved down their throats of their kids. That's what I reckon. But let's have the free market decide it. Now, I don't believe there should be any oversight. Okay, maybe we could start off with a little bit of oversight, but I think it would make the school system really dynamic, innovative. The teachers will have to be striving for excellence. And if they're not performing, the kids aren't happy, and the kids aren't learning stuff, the parents will take them out of that school and put them into a better performing school. It's starting. Milton Friedman proposed this in the 1950s. And only since COVID have about 11 states in America brought in the school voucher on trial basis. And it's going fantastic, because a lot of the parents were sitting at home during stupid COVID watching what their kids had been taught on the Zoom and thought, oh my God, I don't want them learning all that crap.
What about Medicare? What about like a pool of money that's generated to fund universal, relatively cheap, if not free, healthcare for all Australians? I mean, would you say Medicare's been a disaster? Would you abolish it?
Yes, I'd totally abolish Medicare, and we would embrace the Swiss healthcare system, where they've got about 200 private insurers, and basically 99% of people pay for private health insurance. Now, no, about 90% do. Now,
but again, how would you regulate to make sure, like we've seen how problematic it can be in the United States, where insurers who, might not have the oversight or the regulatory oversight, might try and avoid their liability much to the detriment of those people who've paid for their insurance. How do you avoid that?
It's a highly regulated medical system in the United States. It's this ugly hybrid. Now, in Switzerland, who regulates it is performance. Okay, so there's 200 people who say, I want to insure you. Now, they want customers and they want to deliver a good service. And if they become well known for declining a large number of claims, and they'll lose customers. The government is not involved in the Swiss healthcare system, and they have the best health stats in the world. Now, the question is, what about the 10% of people? Everyone can go through a bad patch in life. Maybe some people are born with some physical problem. What do we do with the 10% of people who can't afford private health insurance? Well, what the Swiss government does at the beginning of the year, they send everyone a voucher whose taxable income is below a certain amount, and they say, okay, well, this voucher will give you private health insurance, but you go and choose which one you want to use. This is a much better system than having a big monolith, having bureaucrats and all their staff and all the Department of Health bureaucrats everywhere sort of dictating one size fits all. And it'll be a much cheaper system. It'll be a much healthier system. Okay, the current Medicare system, when you go in to see a doctor at a hospital, they don't sort of say, hey, you know what, if you improve your diet, your cancer might go away. This is just, our healthcare system, because it's run by the government, and the big pharma is so plugged in with the government, have these pills, 15 pills a day for the next 10 years of your life and you'll be fine. And they go, well, you might live another 2 years. No, in the private healthcare system, they really want to see people get healthier because then they don't have to pay as much money in claims. So yes, Medicare is a bad thing.
What about welfare? What about how do you generate, like, if you're cutting taxes,
Yep.
how are you going to generate money for welfare? How are you going to, for people who might be, say, on the DSP or New Start or, down on their luck, lost a job, what do you do with those people?
Well, in an ideal society, what would happen is before the state sort of took over age pensions and unemployment benefits about 100 years ago. Okay, now what happened prior to that? There were friendly societies, and there was churches, and there was voluntary groups.
People starved on the street.
Well,
Went to the poorhouse.
So people would go to a church or a friendly society. They'd say, look, I'm destitute. And they'd say, I need some food and shelter. And they would say, okay, cool. Well, we'll help you for a little bit, but we want to see some moral improvement, some character improvement, some behaviour improvement. And that was good. Now, what happens now with people when the government department says, here's your money, you just got to tick these boxes and here's your free money, and there's no interest in trying to make them a more productive person. Now, the biggest expense, of course, when it comes to welfare.
So you think that'd be a good system? You basically set up like a poorhouse or like you outsource it to a charity, and those charities can say, if you stop having, we'll feed you if you stop having impure thoughts, or you give
being
up
an alcoholic. Yes.
Yeah, you stop drinking.
Well, look, what I think, look, we would have if we let's say all taxes in Australia overnight were halved. It means that a lot of people are going to have a lot more cash in their pocket. Now, we know that people in Australia do have compassion for the unfortunate because they keep voting for political parties that say, yeah, we believe in a high social welfare net.
But what's going to make those people hand that money over?
Well,
why don't they? Some won't. Why don't they?
Some won't, but
there's
others
only
will.
one horse in the race. Isn't that self-interest? Wouldn't they just bank it, put it in the super, buy another investment property? Like, why are they going to start, looking after their fellow man?
You've dedicated yourself to public life because at some point you sort of care about society. And all of our colleagues over there, I mean, a lot of them we don't agree with, okay? You and I often don't agree. But we can all acknowledge that we're basically maybe there's people in politics because they're sort of after a bit of glory and publicity. I'm sure that's in a bit of all of us as well. But at the end of the day, people who are involved in public life, in politics, they sort of are thinking, look, I would like to make the world a better place, okay? So there are people out there. If a lot of people out there have got a lot more money in their pocket, you are correct. Most people will bank it. But good people, compassionate people, maybe some retired people, they'll say, look, I've really got this fantastic CEO. We can really help the homeless people in Sydney. Give me money and you can monitor how I do, but I've got this really fantastic program and this new innovative idea, and we can get them off the streets and we can make them happy, productive people. And then they'll make a presentation to rich people and they'll say, yeah, I believe it. Okay, look, I'll give you $100,000 this year. And if you're delivering, I'll give you $200,000 next year, and I'll tell my mates about it. Now, then if a year later it's not working, then someone else is going to say, no, give me the money. I've got a better way. So we'll have that system. Now, we can't do that overnight, but that is definitely the direction we want to head in. The thing, of course, what will happen is when we cut the taxes savagely, there'll just be a general massive increase in peace and prosperity. People will be happy when we stop giving so much of our money to the state.
If they were prosperous, if they had a job in the first place, because there's some people who don't have a job, they're in poverty.
Well,
So
there'll be lots more jobs. There'll be lots more jobs. But your point is correct. There will always be in any society people that fall through the cracks, and we want to look after them, and we want to. Now, so it's not a question that libertarians don't care for them. We want to. We will all agree that we don't want to see homeless people. We want to see people being happy. So we just have a different approach on what's the best way to do it. We don't believe the big central state is doing a good job. We believe it's entrenching poverty. We believe that if the free market solution to welfare will lift people up.
Now, speaking of making people happy, the Libertarians have got a pretty progressive policy on cannabis and have had for quite a while in terms of the Liberal Democrats. Former Senator David Leyonhjelm, I think, was one of the first people to introduce a bill into the Senate. And in terms of legalisation, what's your policy? What's your plan in terms of legalisation? And why do you want to see cannabis legalised?
Look, we do have a reputation for being the pro-drugs party, which is not true. Okay, I like to tell the example. Let's say somebody, rightly or wrongly, enjoys smoking a joint on their back.
You think you've got a reputation for being the pro-drugs party? Hello.
But let's say somebody, rightly or wrongly, likes to smoke a joint on a Saturday afternoon in their backyard with a couple of mates. And let's say that we were God up in heaven, and we could say that is going to be a net negative in their life. Okay, the health's going to decline a little bit. They're going to have a fight with their wife later that night. It's a net negative. Okay. But then do we want to have a situation where the police knock on the door and threaten incarceration because they made that mistake? The Libertarian says absolutely not. We don't trust the state being that much of a busybody. So it's really, our drug policy is really a position of saying we're not making a moral judgment on drug use because we're a political party. That's another realm. But we are saying we don't want the cops that powerful that they can harass people for making a minor error.
So that's really interesting. So you're pro-cannabis because you don't like the cops,
Yeah.
not because you like cannabis.
Yeah. Well, I have smoked cannabis and I have enjoyed it. Okay. But that you are correct. You summed it up. We say like at worst.
So would you go as far to say that like cannabis like is a net negative in people's lives?
Well, I think because it's currently illegal, it's not being monitored properly. And my anecdotal experience is that probably most people can occasionally smoke a joint, and I think it can be a net positive in their life. But I am pretty firmly of the view that there is a small number of people, but we don't know how small, that they can have a really negative response.
Who's going to monitor them in your like the state?
Well, what
Or the private companies come around and like you and knock on your door and say, you know, how many billies have you had today, Bill?
No, the people who have consumed cannabis and they sort of might be exhibiting signs of schizophrenia, at the moment while it's illegal, they'll be too scared to go to the doctor and say, I've been smoking pot. But if it's legal, they can go into the doctor and say, hey, look, I have been smoking pot and it's making me feel really mentally weird for a few days afterwards. And then it can be properly diagnosed if it's legal. So where we would differ with the legalised cannabis party is, I can see up on your sign, regulate it, tax it, problem solved. We would say it should be as regulated as carrots. The government should just not be involved in this, and we don't believe that there will be an increase in crime.
Kids can buy carrots. Do you think?
Okay, we'd probably say at the age of 18, yes.
Okay, all right, 18-year-old carrots. That's interesting. So what are you going to do about it? You've introduced a bill for a plebiscite. Why do you think that's the best way forward? I mean, citizens-initiated referenda have worked in terms of legalisation in the states. We've seen 38 states around the US adopt legalisation in some form. Is that why you think we should follow the lead of the US?
Look, I think if you secretly asked our colleagues, all of them over there, the upper house and lower house, should cannabis be legalised, and they could answer with anonymity, I reckon it'd be probably 70%.
Oh, I've asked them, and I haven't found anyone who's against it. Yep. I think there's two in the Liberals. I think Natasha McLaren-Jones and maybe Rachel Merton. You know, Rachel Merton called it a ghetto drug, yes. Which was interesting. Not many. I mean, it's like they're Robinson Crusoe, the people who are, you know, again it.
What if you're Chris Minns or Mark Speakman, you want to win the election in just over 2 years' time, you're thinking about Menai, Penrith, Parramatta, the Mortgage Belt, Central Coast, right, the marginal seats. And I believe if there was a plebiscite in New South Wales, I'm pretty sure it would win. I think it would get 55 to 65%. But in those marginal seats in the Mortgage Belt where there's mum and dad and there's young kids, I think that those people will vote against, or enough of them will vote against the party that has legalised cannabis because they are rightly or wrongly scared that their teenage kids are going to end up smoking too much pot. So this is why we are hopeful that the next state election, on the day of the next state election, we can have a plebiscite, a non-binding vote on should we legalise cannabis. We basically just cut and pasted the words from the Florida referendum, which got 56%, got Donald Trump's support, and it basically says we'll legalise pot. Now, the good thing about handing it over to the people is then the politicians, it's off. They can get what they want done, which is cannabis legalisation, but then they can sort of not get the blame for it. That's what I'm hoping is going to happen. Now, let's see. Now, I think
New Zealand did a similar thing, and it got shot down because it, in part because it motivated and enlivened the religious right, who organised against it and ran a pretty effective scare campaign. You don't think that could happen again?
Look, I think the result in New Zealand was 48% yes, and 52% no. Now, what I believe the biggest factor there was that Jacinda Ardern won in 2017, but she needed the support of the Greens. And she said, okay, let's do a deal with the Greens. And one of the conditions of the Green was a cannabis plebiscite. And so they then go and have the cannabis plebiscite. And because Jacinda was known to be left-wing Labor and it's a Greens party thing, I think that enough people in middle New Zealand just thought, no, I'm going to vote no because I don't trust those lefties. So if it's not sponsored by the left, it's better off like when Trump endorsed it in Canada, Florida. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why it would have got up. So,
Well, it didn't get up. I think they needed
in Florida.
Yeah, in Florida it needed 60%.
I would call 56% of the vote a big moral victory.
What's the Republican down there?
DeSantis.
Yeah, he came out really strongly against it.
He did.
Probably, I think, because, Trump had said horrible things about him. But they've made up now.
He's got a bit of an authoritarian streak to him, Ron DeSantis. He's terrific, he's not that much of a sort of a libertarian thinking conservative.
So you're into direct democracy, plebiscites, people deciding their own future. Is that what the libertarians do themselves? Do you have like party-wide votes to pick your candidate?
Yes.
Everyone gets a say.
Yeah, we recently
Because you really tried to get this up in the Liberals, didn't you? I tried very unsuccessfully to get this up in the Greens too, but
Man, I thought the Greens did have a Democratic vote for their winnable positions.
they do in the upper house, but not for their like office bearer positions, not their executives, those sort of things. So they do it for their upper house representatives, but not their office bearer positions. So
who votes? Delegates.
delegates, yeah, democratic centralism. Delegates who elect delegates who do elect delegates who elect four people who decide everything. It's an old Stalinism.
Now, well, in the New South Wales division, we are proud of our democratic record now. We have our state executive voted by all members. You can even dial in via Zoom. And we have we recently had a meeting of...
Well, that's interesting. That's what I really tried to do, and I think it's a really important thing. People should be able to vote from their couch.
Yes.
Do you think people should be able to vote on their taxes? Like, imagine like we could vote on the budget. You had like you laid out like 100 various budgets, and everyone could go through and vote on which one they thought was a good idea.
Oh, I love it. That'll halve the budget. Yeah, and if you can't get more than 50% support for a particular spending initiative, then on the way out.
But might double poverty, which brings us to the great social laboratory for anarcho-capitalism, that is Argentina. Don't cry for me, Argentina. How's it going over there? Because it's It's Javier Milei.
Yes, perfect.
He is over there. The chainsaw, the lion, the El Loco. whatever you like. He's got all these names: the wig, the hair, what the side, the chops. But he's not as silly as he looks. I listened to him on Lex Friedman. Like he's very committed to his economic agenda. You know, he's read everyone, and you know, he's read all the South American neo-libs and all the European, the Austrian School of Economics. He's done the deep dive there, and it's a laboratory there. How's it going? Well, let's start with the crypto float. That looks like it's gone pear-shaped.
Look, I have just seen the headlines about that on social media the last day, so I don't know much about it. Doesn't sound great, but I think it'll pass.
It's probably not the first crypto float that's a pump and dump.
Look, I've spent most of my life revering Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, but I can now, looking back, we can say that they failed because they did cut back the power of the state, but then it grew back real quickly, and now we have the state more powerful and bigger than it was before Reagan and Thatcher. So then what was the point? Now, I love them as people, okay, but they were classical liberals, and they were sort of like the paragons of classical liberalism. But a generation later, and we're now living in a democratic socialist state. Now, Malay says, look, the ideal is anarcho-capitalism. The state is a criminal agency, and what we have to do is, Reagan and Thatcher still say government is good. They just want it to be small. Malay says, and the libertarians say, no, the state is really dangerous, and it's actually the biggest threat that we have. So now, when now, Argentina 100 years ago used to be as rich as Australia, similar living standards. And yeah, they speak Spanish, but ethnically they're actually more Italian than they are Spanish, because there was a ton of Italians left in the late 19th century, and a lot of them came to America, some came to Australia, but a ton went to Argentina. Now, what happened was it was a very, very libertarian country. The Italians were going there because there was small government and they were really into liberalism, okay? Deregulation, pro-business, and the place boomed. And then they have, sadly what happens when you have a lot of affluence is the governments go and elect, you know, socialists, like the stupid Teals on the North Shore. And what happened was they've had these terrible governments since the 1940s. They've had a few military dictatorships, but they've all been socialist. Some have been right-wing socialists, like sort of semi-fascists, like the Perons, but then the others are openly socialist. And they're thieves. And the place is just, I was there a year ago for the inauguration. You walk around Buenos Aires and you can tell that the place was once really rich. There's these beautiful boulevards, the buildings.
Beautiful architecture.
Absolutely.
Massive public buildings.
That's right. Where your office is, there's beautiful architecture around here. But in Buenos Aires, it's 3 times grander. But the only problem is it's all in decay. Okay, the big wide streets, there's rubbish everywhere, there's a few homeless people. The place is a mess, and it used to be so good. Why is this? Because of the big bossy state. So Malay has come in, when
he came in, I think inflation was running at 300%.
Yes.
Crazy.
The first thing you need to do to fix up the economy is kill the inflation, which he has done. Now,
so cut government spending, absolutely pulled that back, reduced that demand, inflation down.
Privatise things.
What has he privatised?
Well, what he does the best type of privatisation. So there's the national airline, and he just gave it to the employees. This is what I think we should do with the ABC and SBS. Just give it to them.
Just you all get a share. Everyone gets
the employees.
They all become shareholders.
Yeah, well, they know how to run the business. They want it to be successful. Now they can go and sell it on the stock market if they want. That's the way to do it. Now, so
they can run some Qantas ads or some alcohol ads on the ABC.
BMW.
You
think they'll want to advertise on the ABC with all their North Shore watches? I think so.
Tesla. Hold on. Tesla.
Oh, they won't do Tesla.
Not Tesla anymore.
No. So
you privatised?
Yeah. Yeah. Look, he
rationalised.
He let in foreign investment, got rid of regulations around mining. I mean, copper. There's more copper in Argentina than there is in Chile. Chile is the world's biggest exporter of copper. It's just they haven't been digging it up in Argentina, even though there's a ton of it there. So
big frackers too, aren't they? I think in Argentina.
Okay.
I think there's a bit of shale gas.
Oh, is it?
Well,
okay.
I think that's been an issue there, that they're letting that rip.
So he's letting in, foreign investors can come in. Now, Malay and his supporters, including myself around the world, warned that if he won the election, for the first 2 years, things would get worse. Okay, this is what we warned about, and he's definitely warned about it. Okay,
because poverty's up. I think poverty's jumped by about 11%. I was reading.
Well, there's
to 54%.
There's conflicting.
I mean, it was high.
reports, yes.
It was high. Like when 30% of your population or 35% of your population's in poverty, and then it goes to 54.
No, well, I believe there are conflicting media reports. The ones that are saying that the poverty level is increasing are actually comparing the sort of the top 20 versus the bottom 20, and they're saying that gap has increased. Yes, it has, but everyone's been lifted up. But yes, the wealthier have got wealthier, but it's like, it's everyone's being lifted up.
A rising tide floats all boats.
Exactly.
Isn't that what the neo-libs say?
Well, it's true. And another cruder way of saying it is the trickle-down economics.
Oh.
People don't like it.
I haven't heard that in so long.
Yeah, but it's true. Would you like to live in a country with 100 billionaires or no billionaires? Well, billionaires, it does trickle down.
Depends which billionaires you're talking about.
But look, with Malay, I would say this.
I don't think you should be able to become a billionaire. That's what I personally think. I think that once you get to, like you've got $100 million, you own that, then you've got to give the rest away.
Well, maybe you could campaign on that for people to do that morally, but we don't want the state turning up at your house with a gun and forcing you to do it.
No. But like at the very least, start farming it out. Give it. I mean, you see these people like what's the Microsoft owner? What's his name?
Gates.
Gates, of course. The Gates found he can't give the money away. Like it's too hard to give away. He's making so much money. He's got this foundation. He's just like. He's literally drowning in cash. Can't give it away. So we should help them. But I just think morally it's wrong. I think when you've got people who have nothing or, in poverty, and then people like inequalities of, like people, what's your view on inequality?
Well, I mean, the good Lord made us all very, very different. And so we'll never be equal, but we should clearly be treated equally under the law. Now let's take Elon Musk, who's worth 400 billion or something. Now you're saying under your model he's got to give away about 399 billion of it, maybe more. Now,
well, no. I'm not saying that. I'm saying like because Musk's worth that, but that's his companies. That's that's not his personal wealth, and his companies have got to keep doing what they've got to.
That's right.
They've got to keep doing what they've got to do.
Expanding. I mean, people like the Teslas.
Yeah,
and he's putting the rockets up into space. That's a good thing, And so no. We should admire people who have, like Elon Musk, who through their intelligence, their super intelligence, and their hard work and their dedication, and there's always luck involved in life.
Like Musk's kids. I mean, Yahtzee. I mean, those. However many there's 38 or however many kids he's got. I think there's another one that's come out of the woodwork today. He's up to 13. I mean, Dad's worth $480 billion. They're probably going to fight over it though. Anyway, look at the Murdochs.
Yeah,
They're fighting.
I read that last night. Yes.
I mean, but what about inheritance taxes or in making sure that like those kids haven't done anything to earn that?
Well, a thing that sort of gets people out of bed and to work hard and stay off at the office late, and make money is to hand over money to their kids. It's a massive motivation. If we take that motivation away, we'll all be hurting ourselves. Now, I'm all for people running public relations campaigns saying that the wealthy should be more into philanthropy. And there was more, the higher you make the welfare state, the less philanthropy there is. Now, there should be philanthropy, but I think we'd agree. You're saying, look, I can't understand why someone would need more than $100 million in their ATM account, okay? Probably right. But the question where we may disagree is, I do not want to pass a law that says you have to hand it over, okay? Let's have persuasion. Some people will want to hand it over. You can say why they should, and they can say why they don't want it. But we don't want, whenever we pass a law, Jeremy, that is backed up by guns. If people disobey a law that gets through that upper house, at the end of the day, even if it's a little speeding ticket, okay, and you get a speeding ticket for $200, you don't pay it. Then another one comes along, now you owe us $300, okay, because you didn't pay it on time. And so I'll stuff that. Then eventually they'll take you to court, but eventually you say, I don't want to go to court. Well, if you get to that point, what will happen is the state will turn up with a gun. Say, Mr. Buckingham, you're coming to court with us right now.
Oh, mate. My favourite movie is Cool Hand Luke. I'm into civil disobedience. You know Cool Hand Luke? No. Paul Newman goes along, and I think he gets done for a parking ticket. And it was back in the day when you put a coin in it, and it had a meter. It was literally a meter. And he goes along with a hacksaw and he cuts them all off as a bit of sort of civil disobedience and gets drunk in the street. And then they put him into jail, and he misbehaves. He doesn't follow the rules, and he ends up just being tortured and escaping and getting shot. But so, this, like, it goes to your point, from a little bit of, power, it can escalate, and you can end up all of a sudden being shot, on a prison farm in Tennessee. But yeah, to your point, which is
the state is backed up by violence. The average person out in the street thinks it's backed up by a democratic vote, but it's backed up by the threat of violence. That's what the state is. For people that are interested, the Pope, the godfather of anarcho-capitalism, is Murray Rothbard. And you can read his essay that sort of kicked it off. It's called Anatomy of the State. It takes you about 2 hours to read. It's free on the internet. And he makes the case. He says, look.
I thought you were just saying the Pope was an anarcho-capitalist.
No. This Pope is a communist. No. That's what I'm saying.
He's an Argentinian too.
He is. Yes, there's two major Argentinians on the world stage at the moment. A good one, and a bad one.
And Lionel Messi.
Murray Rothbard. See, Ayn Rand says, look, we do need to have a government for defence, for courts, and for police. That's what Ayn Rand says, but nothing else. Murray Rothbard says, no. If you keep a state, it will grow back like a weed, and it will eventually become a tyranny. Okay. Now Murray Rothbard says, look, every government is just a criminal gang that at some point in history established hegemony over a particular piece of geography. Once they got that hegemony, they then started putting guns in people's faces and said, hand over 30 of money, i.e. taxes. Then they got all this tax. Then they build a myth around them. They build a myth around the state. They pay off intellectuals to say, oh, this king is so great, or this republic is so great. And it brainwashes all the people and think, oh yeah, the government's good. The government's our friend. The government prevents us from being in chaos. Okay, so that is the origin of all states in this world. And we believe that Javier Milei in Argentina is going to show the world the greatness of anarcho-capitalism. And what is actually happening in October this year is the big test for Milei, the congressional elections. He's got a 4-year term, but this will be 2 years in. His party is looking real good in the congressional elections. They've only got 20% of the Congress at the moment because there's a party that just sort of came out of nowhere.
What's the party called?
Look, it's in Spanish. It's La Libertad or something. Yeah, but basically libertarian in Spanish. And I think he's going to go very, very well and he's been able to do a fair bit, but he only has presidential power. He doesn't have, it's reasonably similar constitution to the US. He's getting some stuff through Congress, but if he can get control of Congress and he's got another 2 years term, well, then he will absolutely, the world is going to be in awe of Harvey Milei. When he got elected, there was all this commentary around the world saying, oh, wow, it's going to be this incredibly interesting experiment. And some people saying, oh, it's going to be a disaster. Okay, but every libertarian on the planet said, there's a 100% chance this is going to work. If we cut taxes in a big way, if we cut regulations in a big way, the people of Argentina are going to become prosperous. It's just going to happen because if you give humans enough freedom, they will make prosperity. All they need is the freedom.
We will see. You went over there. Did you get a chance to? You went to his inauguration, didn't you? Did you get a chance to meet him?
I didn't, sadly, but I went out. What happened with the inauguration was...
How did you get the gig?
Okay, what happened was, so it was about 2 days after he wins the election, I got up and asked our beloved treasurer, Daniel Mookie, a question in question time. He gave a colourful response, and then I got up and did a take note of it, and I had some prepared remarks. And I got up and sit defending Milei. And at the end of it, a little bolt of lightning hit my head. I said, when I finish this speech, I should say, don't cry for me, Argentina is out. Inspire me, Argentina is in. So I say that, put it up on social media. I woke up the next morning, Jeremy, I've got 2,000 new followers on X, and they've all got Spanish names. I'm thinking, what the hell's going on here? And then after about 6 hours, all this Spanish stuff's coming through. And then somebody sent me a DM and said, John, your thing about don't cry for me, Argentina made the 6 o'clock news in Buenos Aires last night. Just a little section. They probably said an Australian senator. Okay, they didn't know how much of a humble little provincial backbench crossbencher I am. And And so then, and then
I always call myself a senator. If I'm doing any media outside of Australia, I say I'm a senator. Because if you say you're from the Legislative Council, they think you're like selling insurance or something. You know, they just think you're like, what?
yes.
So it blew up. You got the invite.
Yeah, well, look, it was a new administration. It was a bit chaotic. We'd heard a rumour that Malay was going to invite me out, and the inauguration was on the Sunday. The invitation only turned up on the Thursday evening, and I thought, oh, God, I've got to scramble here. But anyway, Ross Cameron, our party president, he came over with us. And but look, there
Ross Cameron, the former member for Parramatta.
Yes.
He's made the jump too.
He has. He's our president of the Libertarian Party of New South Wales. We're hoping he can join us in the LC one day.
So the goal is to make yourself, like with me, to make yourself redundant. Like legalise cannabis, job done. So the job, what happens, like can you abolish the state without abolishing representation? Are you still a Democrat?
Well, let's say we only want to bring in the anarcho-capitalist revolution.
Or can you just like do it, you know, from home and just like an opinion poll on every question? Everyone just logs in and votes and it just becomes like the voice for policy and politics and whatever.
We would only want to bring about the anarcho-capitalist revolution through democratic means and through the parliaments.
Revolution. The anarcho-capitalist revolution.
Well, it would be
strong words.
It would be a different society. It'd be a lot more peaceful, prosperous, happy. Now, what would happen is because we would have got this malign cancer off our backs called the state. So the last act of the New South Wales Parliament would be an act to abolish itself and turn itself into a museum, and in fact sell it to the highest bidder. It would become a museum. It would become, people could pay money to go and look at it and say, this is the epicenter of where this great tyranny used to terrorise the people of New South Wales. It would be like a black tourist event, a museum. So lest we forget that, you know, a little criminal gang could be terrorising the people, and this is where they used to do it.
Well, that's hilarious and slightly disturbing. But, I mean, each to their own. I really appreciate your frankness there, John, and your ideas and the exchange. Some people have said, you know, Jeremy, you're getting people from all sides of politics onto the podcast, and you know, you're giving people who they don't agree with a platform. And I've said, well, it's a contest of ideas. Yeah. That's for me what it is. I don't agree with everything you said. Some I do, all the rest, but different approach, contest of ideas, and at least we're having a political discourse without the middleman in the middle, which is the mainstream media telling people what they shouldn't think and sort of pre-digesting ideas for people. People can hear it directly. So that's the idea.
This is what the left used to be like you. They used to be curious. They used to be inquisitive. But now, don't you feel in the last 10 to 15 years, the left have fallen in love with censorship? They do not want to have discussions like this, most of them. But your attitude is like the left that I grew up with.
Oh yeah, look, I totally believe that. Like, I warned the left about woke politics, about censorship, about shutting down debate. The left used to be about like eternal debates, about the ideas were never resolved. That essentially, that we kept talking about things, and so look, I left the left. I don't know what I am now. I think I'm just floating in the middle somewhere, and I'm open to ideas and not buying into dogma. I
think you've got a libertarian streak in you, Jeremy.
Oh, I certainly do. I want. I love freedom and I love liberty, and I'm not against capitalism. I like if any liberalism, I do like Locke's idea. If you're Labor plus the environment, you own it, But then again, I still think that collectively there's some institutions that we can collectively own too. Now, I couldn't let you go without your prediction on what's going to happen in this federal election. 2025. Libertarians are up. You're running Craig Kelly
As a Senate candidate?
as a Senate candidate in New South Wales. You've got an eye on the Senate there. How do you think Albo's going? What's your tip for how Dutton's going to go?
My favourite subject in history is Australian political history. Since 1931, there's been 34 federal elections. The incumbent has won 24. So the incumbent usually wins. That's the starting point. But there's been 10 change of government elections since 1931. And every single one of those new governments got re-elected at least once. Now, they usually got a bit of a fright. Julia Gillard, remember that was she, it looked like, Oakeshott and Windsor gave it to her. And even Malcolm Turnbull, Abbott had won, but continuing on that government was Malcolm won by one seat. John Howard lost the two-party preferred to Kim Beazley. And even the great Bob Hawke had a reasonable and unexpected swing against him in 84. Robert Menzies had a big swing against him in 51. Whitlam had a swing against him in 74.
What do they call it? A sophomore bounce. Your first election.
Okay.
You're people aren't inclined to throw you out, but you might send a message, but they're not going to turf you out.
That's right. I hadn't heard that sophomore bounce. Okay. So these factors, the fact that incumbents usually win, and the fact that a first-term government pretty much always win. Now, they didn't in 1931 because it was the middle of the Great Depression. Very bad Labor government. But then the interesting thing is when an incumbent government is facing a defeat, they're going to lose because 3 or 4 months out from the election, the news poll or the polls in general are just showing a catastrophic defeat. Okay, so like when Tony Abbott defeated Rudd, we knew he was going to win a year before because the polls sometimes had Tony Abbott on 60% and Rudd on 40 or Gillard. When Kevin Rudd beat Howard 60-40 or at least 56-44, big thumping gap. Several months in advance, Howard versus Kenny goes. Now these polls, which the coalition must be feeling some comfort by, it's just showing 51-49. It's not when the people want to throw a government out, they've really made up their mind. Okay, now everything I've said bodes well for a return of Albo. Okay, which I don't want. I want Dutton to win. Okay, well, I'm a critic of Dutton, but I mean better than Albo. But the one thing that could make it very interesting for Dutton, I was listening to your interview at this very place with Joe Hildebrand, and I enjoy his insights. He was very good on COVID, except for the vaccine. He was evil, but he's a smart guy, and he's got good political insights. And he made the point that since Trump won, the whole world's moved to the right a few degrees, okay? And he had some good examples. I can't quite remember them now, but I've just noticed it myself. The people that I know that hate Trump's guts, that 8 years ago when he got elected were just walking around in this, they're just like demon-possessed. Oh, my, all they could talk about is their hatred of Trump. Well, now they just whatever. Okay, they've got over it. And the people that love Trump love him even more. So the whole world, and that's what Joe Hildebrand said. He said, since Trump won, the amount of people that are pro-Australia Day has gone up from 61 to 68 or something.
Yeah, no, pro-Australia Day.
Pro-Australia Day.
Pro-Australia Day.
Pro-Australia Day.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's good for Dutton, okay, that people are sort of over the woke crap. Okay, so look, bottom line is, I don't know how it's going to go, but it's turning out to be a really gripping election. And the bottom...
What about the Teals in the balance of power? Because you were critical about the Teals.
Well, the Teals are the biggest con artists of all time, except for Allegra Spender. Okay, because they basically said, Zali's the queen bee of the Teals. Zali got up there and said, I'm a Liberal. I voted Liberal all my life. My dad used to be a branch president of the Liberal. Okay, and I'm not attacking Tony Abbott from the left. I'm a Liberal, but I just happen to believe that climate change is important, and I believe my gender is important, and integrity, whatever that means. But she's gone and voted with the Greens all the time in Canberra. She's a hardcore left-winger. They all are, except for Allegra. Allegra is, in Wentworth, Allegra is what they said they were. She's a Liberal that believes in climate change. She votes for deregulation, and she's said in the Australian today, I'll probably vote for Dutton in a hung parliament. Zali won't say that because Zali is hardcore left-wing.
Yeah, I think Sophie Scamp said the same thing. Said, I'll make my mind up later on.
Oh, they'll make their mind up. Well, these are the ladies of integrity. They're meant to be Miss Integrity. They've been in Canberra long enough to know who the hell they're going to back. They know Dutton and Albo. They're being deceptive. They should come out and say, vote for me, Zali Steggall, and I will vote for Anthony Albanese in the event that I'm a kingmaker and a hung parliament, which is quite likely.
What about the election? What's your view on electoral funding reforms? Farrell's brought them in. Dutton signed up. Public funding of elections. How should we run elections?
It's all evil. It's all evil. It's the state's going out there to hardworking people, putting a gun at their head, saying cough up money, and then they're giving it to the political parties. No,
but isn't like, while you've got democracy, and I think you slightly want to abolish it, or quickly abolish it. Sorry,
slightly. We do.
We abolish it. Isn't it better to have one where it's just not stacked out by who can suck up to the richest person and just fund their election camp, or be it trade union, be it Gina Reinhart, Simon Holmes à Court, whoever? Isn't it better to have a contest of ideas than a contest of bank accounts?
Well, ideally, everyone in Australia would have an interest in politics, and they would all donate a equal amount to the candidate.
Chance of that, though. But
look, the alternative to a billionaire, like Clive Palmer, through invested 120 billion in the last election, got one senator. So money doesn't always buy votes. Now, the alternative to having,
but I think Clive was sending out CDs. I remember. Like, he sent me a UAP CD. I got a CD in my letterbox. I was just going, what's this direct marketing? I never got a CD before. And don't have a CD. Like, no one's got CD players anymore. So he spammed Australia with just crap marketing, didn't he?
Well, yeah. But look, the thing is, if you don't like rich people donating to political parties, and donating to a political party is a form of free speech. So let's say somebody hears this podcast and they say, that Jeremy Buckingham and the Legalised Cannabis Party, they sound fantastic. I agree with everything he said. And I say, well, that person should be able to write a check for you for $100,000, because now what he's saying is, I love your message. I want to amplify it. And that's a form of free speech. So any restrictions on political funding is an attack on free speech. Now, but your point is, well, what if some particularly wealthy people sort of have an outsized role in it? And I say, well, that may not be ideal for a utopia, but what's the alternative? The alternative is that the state is going to use violence to say, let's say you're only allowed to give 100,000, but someone gives 200,000, and they're going to get in trouble off the state. And the state's going to threaten them with violence because they exercise their free speech too much.
Fascinating. You've got an answer for all of it, and the answer is anarcho-capitalism. Abolish the state.
Over 50 years.
Over 50 years.
Yeah, we don't. If we abolish the state overnight, there would be chaos, clearly. So we need to start with things like education vouchers, privatise the healthcare system. We can do it slowly and bring the people with us.
What about the NDIS? Hate it?
Hate it. It's just so open to rorts. Now what the system before may have been. Look, the people who are genuinely physically, mentally disabled, who can't go and get a productive job, well, of course, we need to have a society that can give them a certain amount of dignity and comfort in life. Everyone agrees with that. Now, but what's happening now is, I don't think we had a crisis before Julia Gillard announced the NDIS, and then, silly Tony Abbott went and legislated the NDIS. Okay, so the Liberals can't complain about it. It's just, look, every few months we're getting these reports about extreme fraud in the NDIS. Okay, and of course, surprise, surprise, you put a big pot of money on the table and you tick a few boxes. People are getting the NDIS because they're saying, I'm stressed out because my kids are noisy. And they say, okay, here's free money. So, of course, it's just an outrageous rort. The whole thing should be shut down.
What about renewable energy? Why can't the free market invest in renewable energy?
Well, of course. Our policy is, we are neutral on the science. Now, I'm not neutral. I believe global warming is a hocus pocus from the left, the remnants of communism. But our party's policy is this: no government favours, no government subsidies, no government bans. Let every source of energy compete in the marketplace. Now, if people happen to really care about reducing carbon dioxide, aka the gas of life, but let's say people think, Obama says it's a toxic pollutant. No cannabis plants without carbon dioxide, and which is those cannabis plants are very important.
In actual fact, carbon dioxide is really good for your weed, especially if you're growing indoors.
Carbon dioxide is good for all plants. Okay, so because that's what it is. It is plant food. Okay, but the left have turned it into this toxic pollutant because they basically, deep down, the really hard left, they hate life. Okay, that's why they hate carbon dioxide. But no, we would say that now, look, if people out there happen to really believe the hocus pocus that the world's getting hotter and hotter because of man-made carbon dioxide, well, they can then go and buy their energy from a low carbon emitting energy source. They might want to pay more money. And then they can also go out there and try and persuade all their friends, run ads on TV, say, look, buy your energy off this people that get it through windmills and solar panels. It's more expensive, but it's going to save the planet from the imminent apocalypse. Okay. Now, we say just get the government out of it. And what would happen then is the reason we've got inflation and a stagnant economy at the moment is because we've blown up our energy supply. All the energy is costing so much money, and energy is the foundation of every industry. Energy, everything you need to plug stuff in. You want to make a pack of twisties, you need electricity. You want to make some aluminium, you need electricity. Electricity is frigging everything. Okay, now what the left, after communism collapsed, they needed another excuse to have a big, powerful, busybody government that's going to morph into a world government. So they completely disgraced themselves in the 20th century. They said, vote for communism and socialism, we're going to help the poor people. Well, as you mentioned earlier, the poor people generally starved to death under friggin' communism. So then when communism fell over, I remember I was in a debate at Sydney University. I said, this is great. This is the end of history. Surely the left are now going to say, well, we were wrong about economics and democracy. And we go and concentrate on other things, rainbow things or whatever. But obviously the right wing is right on economics. That's what I thought they'd say. And one of my mates who I was arguing with, he said, no, John, the left's not over yet now. They'll come in through the back door. Well, and I said, no, of course, surely they just want humanity to prosper and succeed and be happy. Surely they'll see that we were right. The free market guys were right. No, my mate was right. They did come in through the back door. We now need a big bossy government because the world's boiling. It's boiling, global boiling. Okay. I truly believe this summer.
You sound like you were channeling Krusty the Clown then.
Well, this is what the UN Secretary General called it. He called it global boiling, and he didn't retract it. So that's why I stick with global boiling.
What about borders?
Okay, good question.
Now,
okay.
Come on. Like you're worried about a big world government.
Yes.
So, and you want deregulation. What about freedom of movement? Should people be able to move wherever they want, whenever they want?
Well,
do we abolish our borders?
If we get to an anarcho-capitalist utopia, then everyone will be armed, and so they'll be able to determine who comes into their private property as they feel like. But at the moment,
what if they're armed and they decide if they want to come on your private property? They're just more heavily armed.
Well,
doesn't it just become like a feudal society? Don't we just end up with Attila the Hun? Genghis Khan.
Let's slowly phase the state out. I will get back to and look. Maybe you're right. Maybe we get the government down to say 5% of the GDP, and the democratic consensus then is okay. Look, we still definitely need government for these particular things. Maybe you're right. But look, on immigration, I am a libertarian for borders. I believe in having a 5-year immigration pause into this country. I think that we've been unbelievably, exceptionally generous. Australia's very lucky with the migrants we've had in because of the big moat around us. You can't just walk in like you can across the southern border in the United States and into Europe. So we have been able to be very selective about who we let in. And by and large, the migrants have been terrific in this country, okay? But we need a breather.
Why?
Well, look, property prices are going out of control. We haven't built enough properties. Infrastructure's busy. And I'm also looking at Western Europe.
Isn't that because we've brought all the people into two just gigantic mega cities? Everyone's in Sydney and Melbourne.
Well, that's what they choose to do. We give them Australian permanent residency where that's where they're choosing to live. Okay, we can't go and force them to live at Tamworth, but that's what's happening. You are right. Now,
why can't we do that?
Well,
why can't we say if you want to come and live here, like you've got to spend 5 years living in this area this area or that area?
They tried to do it. They go out there. A doctor goes out to Dubbo for 5 years, and as soon as his 5 years up, he says, "Cool, I'm off to Sydney." That is what happened. Now you can't. Sort of, the more rules, people will come around the rules. Okay, if they want to come here, they want to live in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane. Okay, that's what's going to happen. We've got to accept that reality. But no, we need a pause, not just because of the economic issues that I mentioned, but because we look at Western Europe, and at least once a week now, some crazy so-called refugee from the Middle East has gone and driven a vehicle through people or stabbed people at a childcare centre. Now, we are on track for this breakdown in social cohesion to happen in Australia. So surely every political party in this country should be united saying, well, that'd be really, really, really bad if that happened in Australia. It hasn't happened in Australia yet, thank God. And there's
isn't that what they've said about like the Irish Catholics and the Chinese and the Germans and the Greeks and Italians and the Vietnamese? There's always that.
Well, we're not seeing these street level. None of those people. Look, the Italians might have been a bit of mafia there for a while, and every new every migrant group has some settling in issues. But we have these people saying, "I'm going to go and stab 10 kids at a childcare centre." We cannot let this happen in Australia, and we need to have a pause. Now,
how are you going to stop that when you abolish borders?
Well, look, that's a question for well down in the future. Okay, but what would happen?
And who's going to protect those borders?
Well, what will happen under the the Libertarian Party's immigration policy for this coming election is that we abolish the Department of Immigration, which will save everyone a lot of money to start with. But second, we get rid of the points-based system, and we basically auction off permanent residency visas for, let's say, $80,000, and we say, now the migrant can pay the $80,000, or what will happen in most cases is their employer. Let's say you're an engineering company in Australia, and there's a specialist type of engineer that you need, and you need 3 people. The only people in the world that can do it are from Japan. But if he brings these 3 Japanese engineers out here, his business is not going to be employing 100 people; it's going to be employing 10,000 people. So that employer is going to say, well, bloody hell, I'll pay that $80,000 for these 3 Japanese engineers to come out here. So it's going to be the markets determining where do we need skill shortages. I was up on the mid-coast recently, and I spoke to a builder. He said, there's so much demand here. I could build 1,000 houses. I could start working them tomorrow. I said, well, why don't you? He said, I've got no workers. I've got no plumbers. I've got no bricklayers. I've got no nothing. And he said, I can't get them. So he said, we're all just sitting here. Now, what would happen is that guy would say, gee, if I could get some plumbers out from Lebanon, who concreters, they're all pretty good at that stuff over there. I'll bring them out here. I'll pay their $80,000 and I'll make a lot more money. Everyone's happy.
What's to stop them saying, okay, I need a concreter, but I need some. They have to be a Shiite Muslim, or they have to be Orthodox, Catholic,
Well, our party policy doesn't sort of. I think it might mention cultural compatibility should be a factor. And look, the South Vietnamese came into this country in the 1970s through boats, okay, and people would say, well, they weren't culturally compatible. What's the Vietnamese got to do with Australia? But the fact is, they are culturally compatible because the South Vietnamese they were the middle class capitalists of Vietnam who were resisting communism. And half of them ended up in gulags, and they jumped on leaky little boats, and half of them drowned, but they so wanted to get away from the communist rule. And they've come to Australia, and they worked their guts out. They arrived and they couldn't speak friggin' English. And now all their kids are doctors and dentists and accountants and everything else, and they are very patriotic, and they don't march down George Street flying South Vietnamese flags saying, oh, let's reopen the Vietnam War and take over Hanoi.
Not all of them.
Well, none of them do.
You go to Cabramatta, there's still some.
Okay, they might be showing the flag.
There's still some flags,
but they're not having protests. I don't like migrants coming to this country and importing the stupid war that they're so excited about. Look, you're in Australia. You've won the lotto of life. Give up on that stuff. Now, if you really care about it so much, you're welcome to go back.
Well, John, I can say this. You've got a lot of opinions. You're very forceful with them. We will have a look at what happens in Argentina.
Good.
Hopefully we're not crying for Argentina in coming years and decades. It's a big social experiment. The Libertarians are with their hands on the levers of power. So, yeah, we'll be paying attention. I really appreciate you being frank and forthright and coming into the weeds to talk about you and your party. Really appreciate it, mate.
Thanks very much for having us, Jeremy. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks, John. And remember, everyone, like, subscribe, share. Thanks. See you next time.